Hey, welcome back, everyone. I wanted to go ahead and explain some things about what we did for the duplex and how we ended up buying that one. There was a lot of questions I had about what the actual financials look like. Why did I pick that house? And then a number of people that said it was ugly, and I completely agree. So I wanted to show you kind of how we ended up looking at this house, what we think it can do, what I think that we can do with it, and why it's going to be a great buy. So stick with me, and we're going to explain all the numbers. And at that point, we'll be able to hopefully have some good feedback about what we're looking at. Okay, so here's the first listing that we showed. It was listed as a 6-bedroom, 4-bath. So 6-bedroom, 4-bath duplex, meaning 3-2 on each side. And it was also listed as having an off-street garage parking. It was a 2-bay garage, and it was already a fenced-in backyard. All of that becomes important because it kind of sets it up as a unicorn for the area. So the first thing we looked at was that it was $99,000 for the listing price. That becomes important because it was within what we could afford. And then so I looked into everything I could from the realtor. I reached out to her and asked her for information on did we have further pictures, and then also what was the seller, where was it coming from. All those became very important in deciding whether or not we wanted to put an offer in on it. But off of initial look, we've been looking into that area, that neighborhood specifically, and I can show why as we go forward. But the very first thing that catches it is the fact that it's $99,000 for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath per side duplex. The reason why that's important is because each side, once it's rented, should be between, I have it at a minimum of $750 per unit. So we use those for our assumptions going forward, and then you can kind of get an idea of what that's going to look like. So this is where we plug in our numbers to start. We immediately go back into here, and I'll go through the spreadsheet to just kind of explain it a little bit. But this is something I found, years ago when I was barely doing this, even part-time or even before. Now you can do everything the long way, and there's a way that you can do this all manually, but I found that this spreadsheet was really a good way of looking at everything and breaking it down for you. So the very first thing that we look at is our purchase price. And then I take that information and we put that in. Now it's at $99,000, but I'm assuming that it's going to be close to 100, so we put it in at 100 just to round off our numbers. Now I can look up the land value and the property values based off of what the tax assessor's websites say, and then the improvements are just based off of what I initially can tell from looking at it. Now when I first talked to the realtor, it was understood that they had an add-on when they added on that bathroom, and so their belief was that the electrical had been updated and upgraded, so there was no longer knob and tube, and it would have been an upgraded electrical system, which means that it needs cosmetic work, but the bones should be in pretty good shape. And there was nothing in the pictures that told me that there was anything else wrong with it. Now I'll get into that once we get into the inspection and what we found, but this is again what we originally thought. Our original thoughts were that we were going to need probably close to $25,000 worth of renovations for cosmetic issues and everything else to get it ready. Closing costs are approximately $1,000. It should be less than that. And then our selling costs, and this would be only whenever you turn around and put it into this. Now, when we go into revenue increases, operating increases, and annual appreciations, these are actually based on market indicators. I'm just leaving them at a flat value. It is possible that revenue does not move up as quickly as expenses increase, but I'm just keeping them locked in. And we can look at the appreciation of the area. Indianapolis greater area has actually been closer to an annual appreciation of 8%. But just putting it in at 1 is just to get our basics amount. We're not looking at too much of that, because really what we're looking at for this duplex is mostly as a cash flow. So we look at what our down payment would be. Now we're paying cash for this for the property, so we're looking at how much we can get out. So if it ends up being an after repair value of approximately $130,000, if you look at it as a 75% loan to value, meaning that we should be able to pull out roughly $95,000 in cash back out of it once we get it mortgaged. So I'm assuming that amount, and then I'm assuming that we're going to have it at close to 6%, and I'm not assuming 30 years because, again, with a commercial, and this isn't a commercial loan, but on a multifamily, it's unlikely that you get it at a 30-year mark. Now, again, I'm going to work with a couple of different brokers, but I just wanted to get this as a ballpark idea. It tells us how much our cash outlay would be once we get the cash back from mortgaging it, and then our mortgage payment. How many units we have, what their total income is at $1,500, and then what our actual amount per year is. Now we have a vacancy rate put into there of basically saying we believe it's going to be vacant for at least a month. It goes into over here. Now this breaks down everything else to us. Now these are all numbers that you kind of learn as you start to do investing, especially real estate investing, between cap rates, gross rent multipliers, cash return on investment, debt service coverage ratios, annual cash flows. A lot of these different things you kind of get into to understand what you're looking at once you get into these numbers, and we could break into these, and maybe we'll do another video someday to explain what all these different numbers are. But the key thing that I'm interested in is this number, cash return on investment. So basically our cash is going to get tied up for about a year while we kind of do this and get it all seasoned, is what they refer to it at. Now there's some options in between there which I'll get into at another point, but the point of it is that we can get back down to approximately a cash outlay of around $31,000, and it's going to be making us, once you get into your expenses and your mortgages and everything else, you're going to be getting down to a cash flow of about $5,000 a year off of $30,000 outlay. So that's a big cash return. Now to get into that, you'd have to go, well, how did we determine the rest of these values? So let me get into that too. I looked up the actual property taxes. Now insurance actually wasn't, originally we thought it was closer to $800. When I raised some of the limits and everything else of that, it actually ended up being closer to $1,100, which changes some information. So we'll just pull that up there real time so you can see that. Maintenance and repairs, I have it at $100 a month. Now that's not considering cap expenditures. Capital expenditures are everything like the majors, roofs, HVACs, all those things. Okay. Advertising, utilities, these are just holding numbers. Advertising is really not as expensive as people think because it's just putting things on Zillow and Craigslist and such. And utilities would just be holding utilities. I'm only going to hold it for probably a month or two before it's rented. So these shouldn't be that high. Now, I didn't do it originally with property management. Once I actually found out what we should be able to rent it for, and talking to a property management company, we actually put those numbers in, and I'll pull those up in a minute. But this was back when I was first making an offer on it. The key ideas and all the other stuff that I really focused in when I started looking at this was that these returns aren't normal. That's really where we finally go, okay, my ears have perked up. Indianapolis became a hotbed for investing, and what I was seeing was that exorbitant purchase prices for very small returns on rent. And this should be our worst case scenario. If it was, in fact, we bought it, if we could buy it at $100,000, if it only needed $25,000 worth of improvements, and if we could only rent it for $750 per side, and that's $750 per side. If I could only do that, it would cash flow, and it cash flows pretty well. No major appreciations, no other issues. We would make money on the 1% appreciation annually, and then we would also make money on the fact that the mortgage is being paid down. That's when you get down into what the total return is, because you have equity accrued and appreciation on top of what your actual cash flow was. So your total return gets you a different number. And that's what becomes important down the road. This is why when I have I'll do a video later about why real estate, more than anything, is a long-term play for generating true wealth. But for right now, just understand that these numbers are pretty darn good. So really it's because the area is not great. And it's not the best area in the world, but it's not the worst neighborhood either. We're trying to find kind of a sweet spot, and that's kind of what this is. So I'll get into that here in a second. Okay, so this is where the rental's located, right here on Illinois. And this area, 38th and Meridian, is downtown Indianapolis. It's the north side of Indianapolis. Basically, as a rule, 38th Street is really not the greatest area in the world. It is pretty much south of 38th is where a lot of people's cutoff is for anything that they would even look at, because it starts to get into a bad area. However, Meridian itself and this area is not terrible. And then specifically east of Meridian, this over here in the Watson McCord, Fall Creek historic area. Like all of this area is really pretty nice. And if you look, these are the multifamilies that are selling over here, closer to the $200,000 mark. North of that, same thing. But Crown Hill hasn't seen any of that. It's still kind of a bad area. Now north of Crown Hill, you get up towards Butler. And Butler University is also, in the area around it, is seeing growth. And you're seeing multifamilies up here going for a good amount. So usually as a rule, like you want to try to buy something that's close to one area of development and hope that it carries over. Well, we're kind of buying right in between two areas of development, and I'm hoping that we're going to see a little bit of growth. This is not the same as the east side of town. Like honestly, the east side of Indianapolis is very, very block specific. And this area is not as bad. Capital in Illinois, in this area in Crown Hill, is more of a working class area, and it is definitely still needs some improvement, but it is not as bad as some of the bad areas to the east. So I felt that this is actually not a terrible area, this area in Crown Hill, and this is just north of the Children's Museum, and then there's a number of high schools all through here. So it's really a developed, really good little area to look at. Now I pulled up the area around it to show you what actually sold, what actually recently sold in the area. Now this 69 on Illinois that's close to it was really bad area. It was a really bad duplex, and it was only a 2-1 on each side. So that gives you an idea. Like that's our basement. Our basement amount was $69,000 for that area. So this 150 was one that's actually much closer to what ours is. Now this 151,000 was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, and it was over on Capitol. Now there's actually one for sale, one street behind it right now on Salem that I want to show you. That's really kind of an interesting take on this. But this is how we came to the amount of, I think 125 to 135 is good, but I do see a lot of potential for growth, and I think that with the right touches, this could be worth more than that. These are the rental comps that we looked at. So I pulled up anything that was a 3-bedroom apartment at under $1,100 just to look at what was specific to it. So the closest one to us for the number is number 1 here at $950, and it's a 3-1 duplex. It's a little bit larger, but it has no garage, but it is newly renovated. So that I think is a high end, and I don't necessarily know that we would be able to get to that amount. Not because we can't command it, but I think that they're asking a little much for this area. But even south down here at 2, this is $835, and this is a 3-1 duplex, renovated, but they don't allow pets, and their laundry's in the kitchen. They don't have a separate area for laundry. Our laundry's in the basement, so it's a separate area for that. And we also will allow pets, and we also have off-street parking. So this again is higher than what I originally was assuming. We go up to 3, all the way up to the north of us. Again, it's a 3-2, but they're renting by room because this is closer to the university. No pets, no parking, all that. Down here to 4, Ethel, no pets, no garage, and it's a 3-1.5. And I looked at this one also, and it's in bad shape. I really don't think that we're going to be here. So I really do think we're going to be in this spot between these amounts, between 8 and 900. So I changed our assumptions based on that to increase them to 800, and I put one of the units at making 850, because once we allow pets, we can move up into charging a little bit of a premium for that and move from 8 to 850. So I have one at 800 and one at 850. It's just a hair north of where ours is. It actually sits closer to 38th Street. This one has not been sold yet, but it sits on the market right now for just over $200,000. I think they're asking more than what they're going to get for it, but it's been completely redone. And that's the key thing that I want to show everyone, is that this has just been cleaned up on the exterior. There's some other still minor issues. I think that's why I don't think they're going to get close to what they want for it. But I want to show the interior. This is the interior of Illinois, 2 sides. So the key thing to look at here is that you're looking at the fireplace entries in both rooms. They're just looking at different sides. This one has this beautiful archway. The other one had that wall removed. The Salem property, the one I'm going to show you, still has this archway. You'll be able to see this banister, these areas for where the wood has been painted, and you're going to see these hardwoods redone. This is the exact same thing. We were standing in the other room over here, looking through the archway, looking this way towards the banister, and there's a fireplace on this wall on the interior over here. This is with updated and cleaned wood floors. Everything's been painted and everything's been cleaned up. The wood and the windows here, again, the trim has been fixed and repainted, and the old wood, these are still the older windows. These are not brand new vinyl windows. You can see that the banister, everything else has been painted and prettied up. So again, this is what we looked at. Back here, this archway, over here is this, to show you that same idea. You're going to see all of that, same thing. It's a sister build, it's the exact same thing. And then if you go upstairs, or this is looking at it from the other direction, this is going back into the kitchen, so you can see what all this is. And as a matter of fact, you can see these registers back here. See? There's the register on that side, there's the register on this side. And you're looking right in this same exact wall as you are right here. Same registers, same banister, same everything. This is just updated. That's all this is. This is the upstairs to show you what happens once they cleaned it up. So this is all still nice wood, and this same wood exists in Illinois. It just needs to be cleaned up and changed, and then it has this beautiful lighting all the way down. This hallway's a little bit cramped, but otherwise this is exactly what we're looking at. So if you're looking at this in comparison to Salem, you look at it and say, this looks a little bit, Illinois looks kind of dingy compared to Salem. Well, yeah, Illinois hasn't been fixed in years, hasn't been upgraded and updated in years. But this isn't a huge lift. What we're talking about here, whenever you're looking at changing Illinois, what you're looking at is you need to just get in here and clean all this, repaint the walls and fix the floors, and then change out some of the lighting and upgrades. And you can easily get it into this. This is not a big lift. As a matter of fact, when I looked at some of this stuff, these are not expensive. None of this is. And they didn't change out the HVAC. It's the same exact flooring, the same exact everything else. Okay? Same thing with up here. These are just standard lights. Nothing that can't be done. We found out that it did need new electrical. We found out that it did need some work in the attic. We found out that there was a little bit more work than what we'd initially anticipated. Those improvements should be around $35,000 total. We've already had quotes on the electrical and had a lot of quotes on the attic, the mold abatement. Got some ideas for foundation, lots of little things. But all of those little things, and I'm going to have a whole separate video about what that inspection process looked like. But based on all of that, we were able to get down the purchase price down to $89,900. So here's the new purchase price. Nothing changes in there with all the rest of our assumptions, though. Our improvements and our cost to do renovations go up. I think that our after repair value is closer to $145 based on what we just looked at, all the comps. Once it's brought up to what it should be, I do think that we're closer to $145. I think that we're looking at making $800 per unit, so that makes us $1,600 a month. Plus, I think at least $50 extra between dog or garage in extra payment. So that means that our total revenue, our total gross revenue is $1,650 a month. I'm still leaving in 1 month of vacancy. I'm hoping that once tenants are in, that they'll most likely stay long term. However, because property management still takes in at least 75% or takes into one full month of rent, I like to leave that in here. So this is also with property management in place. I did have a good conversation with the property manager who told me that they firmly believe that they can rent this out no problem at $800, and depending on the finishes I put in, it could be more. But they firmly believe that $800 should be my basement. And so with that, I also looked at having them being paid at 10% per month. And then we got an actual quote on what our insurance and everything else was. Still leaving in a little bit of money for maintenance and repairs, because I do think that things are going to happen throughout the year, and it'll be more. We're going to keep the rest of it, a lot of money in capital expenditures. So what that means, again, now looking at all of this information, I did change my annual appreciation amount up to 2% because I think that's a more realistic figure. So this is trying to give you an idea of the most realistic breakdown. So if our most realistic breakdown looks at what our total cash outlay will be, how much everything will be, and even with property management in place, taking a 10% off the top. That means I'm not going to be getting phone calls of my sink is leaking. That means that I'm not going to have to deal with the tenants getting tenants in and out. I will basically just be collecting a check. With all that being said, I'm still making good numbers on all of this, and I think that it's a solid pickup once you have it fixed, once you have it stabilized, once you have it in your portfolio. Your cap rate at 10% and cash ROI of over close to 15%, which is where we want to be, I think is going to be a good solid win going forward. Thank you for sticking with me for almost 20 minutes. If you did, then I'm impressed, and I appreciate it. Please, if you found any of this information helpful, please just like it or subscribe to it. Every little like or subscribe helps me, gives me incentive to realize that people might be interested in at least what I'm doing. Even if you're not necessarily into real estate and you're just interested in what I'm doing, then I appreciate that. But if there's anyone who's really interested in real estate and what I'm doing there, then it helps me too. If there's anything else I can do for you as far as explaining some of the information or getting into anything else that you want to talk about, then please just let me know. I still owe a number of videos on like how we got into this, why the very first project, what I did, how that all worked out, how we ended up funding all of this. So there's a number of videos to follow. I just felt that this information was important to get it about the duplex, and it was already long enough. I didn't want to make this any longer than it needed to be. So thank you so much, and have a great day.